Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. It's just one video shot on a cell phone recently at the University of California at Riverside, but it tells you a lot about what our kids are learning at school and therefore where we may be heading as a country. In the video, a student called Edith Messias sees a man wearing a Make America Great Again hat and becomes so enraged that she steals it off his head. He demands it back, she refuses, and this exchange ensues. Watch.
You know what this represents? This represents genocide.
I understand.
Genocide of a bunch of people.
You do not get to take other people's property that is legally theirs in this country.
Man, your laws. You're recording me like I'm the criminal here.
Because you stole my property. That is literally a crime.
This land. Your ancestors stole this land.
That is
I hate this country.
That's why I say leave.
I hate it, and I'm not leaving.
That's why I say leave.
I'm staying here because there needs to be fixed here, so that's why I'm staying.
Okay, then
All right?
but you don't fix it by breaking the laws.
Because we need to get rid of all y'all. Freedom of speech, boy. It.
I don't care what you have to say.
Because your freedom of speech is literally killing a lot of people out there. That's what it is. Because you're out there wearing hats like these that promote laws and legislations that literally kill and murder in the masses people of color.
F your laws. I hate this country, and I'm staying here anyway. Your ancestors stole this land. Your free speech is killing people. It used to be that only the ignorant or the insane talked that way. Yet this is a woman who completed high school and is now receiving a college education, and that's what's changed. Edith Messias talks this way precisely because she was educated in America. She learned these views in school. She and millions of other students who for the past 30 years have been taught to hate America, its laws, its customs, its history. While the rest of us are busy at work raising families, our children are learning that America itself is illegitimate and evil. To them, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are not seminal documents protecting essential freedoms. They're scraps of paper complicit in some vaguely defined genocide. Edith Messias has learned that America is rotten, and therefore she believes she has no positive obligations to our society. She believes that people who look like the founders of this country are stained with blood guilt, and it is her right, even her duty, to hate them and to punish them for the crime of existing. She didn't come to any of this on her own. She was taught it. Millions of young people are learning the same lessons. Every time an athlete protests the national anthem or a school bans American flags on Cinco de Mayo, those lessons are reinforced. This is the future the left is creating. Once you accept that everything older than the milk in your fridge is morally reprehensible and must be destroyed, the entire past starts to look like an uninterrupted nightmare of bigotry and depression. You begin to see racism everywhere, even here.
The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be, perhaps, that his shoes were too tight. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right.
That's right. Dr. Seuss has been called out as a racist. A month ago, Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis were the designated villains. Their statues were toppled, their existences purged from popular memory. But the revolution has gathered steam since then. Now, a librarian in Massachusetts has rejected First Lady Melania Trump's gift of Dr. Seuss's books, claiming the illustrations are, quote, racist caricatures. Well, the Cat in the Hat is a wonderful cat, but leftists could not be contented with that. In modern America, everything's racist, they'll say as they search for invisible traces. A wonderful cat in a hat can't be funny. He has to be mocking black people for money. And even if Dr. Seuss had no intention to do any wrong, they'll destroy his invention. You'd think that there's no way that this could be true, but for today's leftists, the limits are few. With each day's new outrage, they simmer and stew and suck in their faces until they turn blue. LaDawn Jones is a former Democratic state representative from the state of Georgia, and she joins us now. LaDawn, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me back, Tucker.
So I'll admit, as a middle-aged man who majored in history, not postmodern feminist poetry, this was confusing to me, and I mocked it at first. Dr. Seuss racist? He was a liberal. But then I read, as they say in graduate school, the text. And so I think I understand what's going on here. I want to read you a portion of The Cat in the Hat, and you confirm for me that this is, in fact, bigotry. I know some good games we could play, said the cat. I know some new tricks, said the Cat in the Hat. A lot of good tricks. I'll show them to you. Your mother will not mind at all if I do. The cat is being portrayed as shady and manipulative here. And that clearly is bigotry. I think you'd agree.
I don't know if I can agree with that. So, you know, we're going to whether or not Dr. Seuss had a history of racism in his past, and it is true. Now, will we call every Cat in the Hat, every Dr. Seuss book a picture of bigotry and racism? I think that may go a little bit too far.
Oh, I don't. Then
overall,
maybe. But hold on. Wait, no, but you're not. You're reading. Okay, so I guess I have an advantage here because I have, as we say in the academy, the text right in front of me. I want to confront you with the text once more. Then Sally and I did not know what to say. Our mother was out of the house for the day. Now, if that's not a damaging stereotype of single parenthood, I don't know what is. And the idea that this kind of garbage winds up in the hands of preschoolers, I guess shouldn't surprise me given the racist nature of our country. Are you surprised?
You know, that's cute, Tucker, but the reality is, you know, that the librarian that called Dr. Seuss's works partly bigotry and racism spent the majority of her letter to the First Lady of the United States on something far more substantive. But of course, conservatives who want to accuse people who bring up racial issues as race baiting will only focus on that part of her letter.
No, but actually,
what is a serious situation?
But hold on. I don't think all bringing up racial issues is race baiting at all. I'm doing it now, and I'm not race baiting, and I think there are lots of legitimate conversations to have. I'm responding to something very specific she said, which was that Dr. Seuss is a racist. She said that. Now, this was troubling to me as someone who was weaned on Dr. Seuss, who raised 4 children on Dr. Seuss. And then I realized, and I think we have the pictures here, that it's not just my family, but famous political figures have endorsed Dr. Seuss, including the Obamas. And I think we may have actual documentary evidence of the Obamas reading Dr. Seuss. Oh, here it is. Watch.
Pretty much all of the stuff you need to know is in Dr. Seuss.
Now, we're in a revolutionary moment where we're reassessing what we thought we knew. And I'm sure that you're an Obama supporter. In light of what he just said,
so.
Can you continue to support him?
Oh, absolutely. Because here's the reality for many African Americans and people of color in the United States. There are parts of American history, there are famous people in American history who we have to take them for their great parts and dismiss them for the parts of them that were brought up in some of the racist and biggest ways that America had in its history. And so Dr. Seuss, I actually had to, once I heard the story, pull out our Dr. Seuss books that are on my children's bookshelf and take a closer look at them so I can see exactly what it was that was the complaint. And as is normal for many of us.
What was it? I mean, actually, I've been obviously speaking tongue-in-cheek because this is, like, literally demented. But since you said that you checked Dr. Seuss for racism, what did you find? Where were the racist parts?
So you look at many of the drawings, and you have to put it in the context of the times that many of these books were written. And you can see that there are some very stereotypical drawings of Asian Americans. Dr. Seuss was known for some very stereotypical blackface drawings prior to the books that most of us are familiar with and know and have on our bookshelves.
What books are you talking about? I mean, I grew up not far from Dr. Seuss in California. Theodore Geisel, he was kind of a local hero, big liberal, as I'm sure you know, and he wrote a bunch of books against racism, including The Sneetches, great book. I'm not aware of what you're talking about. I don't think he did many books where he illustrated people. What books specifically on your bookshelf were racist?
Absolutely. No, not specific books. He was actually a cartoonist for political ads. And so if you, a simple Google search, and the first few images that will pop up of Dr. Seuss, you would see where he drew very stereotypical black-faced pictures of individuals and of people portraying stereotypical views of Asian Americans and African Americans. It's common.
So maybe you're leaving out a little
admitted to it.
Do you think you're leaving out some context? The Asian Americans you're talking about were the Imperial Japanese government during the Second World War, the ones who took over Asia and raped and tortured hundreds of thousands of people to death. So you think it's racist that he portrayed that government in an unflattering light? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I would imagine that if I were to draw some of the Confederate soldiers in the same kind of light that he did, despite the fact that they were treasonous, people will still find many of those caricatures, if I took their worst features and put it out there and made fun of them, they would call that racist too. So yes, actually I do. It doesn't matter if they were bad people.
It's okay to, I think it was okay in 1943 to mock the Japanese army, and so maybe it's lacking a little historical context. It's not okay. It's not okay. Who puts you in charge of what's okay? Like, wait, let me just ask: is there any recognition? I know we're like debating on TV and everything, but do part of you think like wow, the people I'm around, maybe even myself, we're scolds. We've like turned into something we used to hate when we were kids, which is people who jump up and say, you can't do that. I mean, do you ever think that? Like, what have I become? That I'm denouncing Dr. Seuss?
Well, no. I'm going to tell you what is the first thing that normally comes to my mind is respecting the person who is near me, respecting the people who are around me. I may have private opinions, but there's certain things that you don't say out loud. There's certain things that you stop yourself from thinking out of simple human respect for common man. For example, a perfect one is when your president calls an entire league SOBs. Those are things that you just don't say out of your mouth, particularly when you are a person of power. And so although you may accept it in your community to just say, oh, we talk about people of other races as if it's not a problem, I think a good human American to make America great again knows that we respect our neighbors.
I love the parenthetical charge of racism. In your community, you might do that. No, actually, he's denouncing professional athletes of a bunch of different colors. So slow down, LaDon. But you're dodging my key question, which is, why in the world is the left discrediting itself by going after, of all people, Dr. Seuss? Like, it's absurd. Do you recognize that at all? I think there's racism that exists. I mean, of course there is. But Dr. Seuss was not a major purveyor of it. So, like, why are you hassling Dr. Seuss? That's kind of the question. Do you feel silly when you do that?
Absolutely not. And let me tell you what's absurd. This librarian who brought up this whole Dr. Seuss issue had a whole 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs before she talked about Dr. Seuss that talked about how ridiculous it was that they used taxpayer dollars to send books to overprivileged schools that didn't need them. But instead of focusing on that very important point that you should agree with since you're a fiscal conservative, you want to focus on the latter part of her letter that talks about Dr. Seuss. You know why? Because you want to trivialize what really could be an important issue.
I mean, she sounds like the silliest person maybe who's ever lived in this country. Okay.
Isn't it ridiculous that the First Lady of the United States wouldn't know that a school already had all of the most common
I can't believe she sent Dr. Seuss books to a library. She should be in jail. I mean, listen to yourself, LaDon. You're a nice person. I don't mean to be mean, but come on now. Thanks for joining us tonight.
It's not mean. It's just not realistic. And unfortunately, we need people like you to speak up and say that, you know what?
Stop sending Dr. Seuss books. It's big-headed. Yeah, okay, good. I can't wait for this year to be over. Mark Stein has written quite a few books of his own, though the Obamas didn't like them quite as much as they liked Dr. Seuss. Maybe they need to reassess. He joins us tonight. What do you make of Seussgate, Mark?
Yeah, I think when you said it's trashing anything older than the milk in your fridge, that's right, Tucker. This is like year zero in Cambodia. Yeah. The world has to be created anew. So in the space of about 20 minutes, we've gone from the Confederate flag is racist to the Star-Spangled Banner is racist. We've gone from General Lee is racist to Dr. Seuss is racist. We've gone from way down on the levee in old Alabama is minstrelsy to the cat in the hat is minstrelsy, which is actually this librarian's argument. I looked up the piece she referenced in the Journal of Social Justice Librarians or whatever it is, and it is incredibly moronic. It is part of the dumbing down of American society. The piece argues that the cat in the hat's bow tie is meant to be an evocation of 19th century racist minstrel shows. Now, just off the top of my head, cartoon characters who wear bow ties, Porky Pig, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, Huckleberry Hound. Yogi Bear doesn't wear a bow. He wears a necktie like me, but his boy sidekick Boo Boo the Bear wears a bow tie. Ambrosio, I think the name is, in My Little Pony wears a bow tie. I'm not one of the many men in the Western world who are obsessed with My Little Pony and have My Little Pony parties, but I happen to know this one character in My Little Pony wears a bow tie. Cartoon characters wear bow ties. That's nothing to do with minstrel shows. We are making ourselves a society too stupid to survive, as that California student demonstrates, if we go down this path.
What's so striking to me is, so we're debating the tax bill in Washington right now, and the entire conservative establishment is kind of on board, and they're very spun up about it, and that's fine, and they're right about most of it. I think I'm not mad about it. But this is what they spend all their time doing here in D.C. All these nonprofits are focused on the tax code, which you can change instantly with a vote. Meanwhile, the culture has become so rotted that I'm wondering if we can hold together as a country. Maybe they should have paid a little more attention to stuff like this and a little less to capital gains taxes over the past 40 years. Do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I would say the education system is the biggest structural defect in the United States and most other Western countries. I get these emails, or every time you do a story on the latest bit of campus craziness, I get these emails from people saying, oh, whatever happened to common sense? Well, common sense presupposes that a society has something in common. And if one person looks at a cat in a hat and thinks, oh, there's a cute cat in a funny candy-striped hat, and the other sees a 19th century minstrel show, then in fact they do not have enough in common to hold together. And that's what's really crazy about this. And just to go back to what you were talking about earlier, the problem here is that if everything is racist, nothing is racist.
Well, that's right.
So that if the Confederate flag is racist, if Robert E. Lee is racist, if and then we go to the national anthem is racist, the flag is racist, now Dr. Seuss is racist, then nothing is not racist. And we're actually nuttier than the Nazis on this. I mean, Hitler's favorite operetta was The Merry Widow, which at the time was also the biggest hit on Broadway. And nobody in the height of insanity after the Nazi period in Germany thought to examine The Merry Widow as a sort of covert Nazi thing. It just happened to be a piece of music Hitler liked. We're actually getting nuttier in our cultural totalitarianism.
Your point that common sense presupposes a common understanding of the world is really deep. I'm going to be thinking about it all night. Mark, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Tucker. Loved your poem, by the way, although I think some of your tetrameters were a bit dodgy.
That's for sure. Thanks.